Thank you.
We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome to people watching on YouTube as well. You're all very welcome. Just a very quick amendment at the start, and by way of apology. It does say on the agenda Stephen Cleasby is one of the co-optees. That's not correct. It's actually Professor P.W. Roberts. So we're very sorry about that. It looks like an admin error somewhere along the line, and we will make adamantly sure that that never happens again. So apologies, Professor Roberts. We'll hopefully try and manage it throughout the meeting. I'm aware that you've had some issues with your papers, so we'll be mindful about pointing towards numbers of pages and be very clear. But do feel free to chip in without the need to wait your turn if there's anything you need clarifying.
Thank you. That's very good of you.
No problem. Okay, welcome everybody to this official Climate Change Working Party. Appreciate all of your time. We've got some big substantive items to get through and really important ones, and I think your input's going to be really important today. So let's just run through some of the initial agenda items. The first one being, are there any substitutes nominated for this meeting, or any apologies for absence?
Excuse me, I've not been sent any apologies, Chair, and the only substitute on the one you've just mentioned for Roseanne Mulligan for Adrian.
Hi, Hi, Roseanne. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Roseanne, and I recently joined the board of Slow the Flow, and have been I'm a blow into Calderdale. I moved up here from London in 2013, but I'm enjoying life up here.
Fantastic. Well, we're very thankful to have you, and we'll try and do our best as a group and introduce who we are when we speak, if we can remember. Might not always be possible, but if not, I'm sure you'll pick it up as we go along. Councillor Dickinson, I see your virtual hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Patient. Apologies from Councillor Stephen Lee, and sort of from myself. I'm going to have to go at 7-ish. Tuesday night's one of my contact nights with my son. I may have to go camera off, but if things get a bit busy, then I might need to leave the meeting. So apologies in advance for that.
Thank you for that, and we will maximise your impact in the time that we have with you.
No pressure.
I can't see anyone else unless there's scrolling through my screens. No. Okay, so do any members have any interests arising based on the agenda items this time round? That looks like a no to me. Okay, fantastic. Admission of the public. So yeah, this clearly is a meeting held in public, so there are no agenda items that I can see that are going to need to be held within private. So the whole section of the meeting, the full 2 hours or however long it takes, will be entirely open for everyone to view. Looking back at the minutes of the last meeting, which in terms of official meetings was held on the 15th of September 2021, does anyone want to agree that as a correct record of what happened? Happy to. Councillor Lynn, I see your hand up. And would anyone care to second that? I don't see any hands, but I could be missing someone. Councillor Dickinson, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I don't know if there's anything on there that we need to pick up, but maybe if we do, unless felt entirely urgent, we could sort of pick up within the general other agenda items that we're discussing. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, we do have we're shifting around the question time. We've had it at the beginning of the meeting. We've also had it at the end, and on this one it's in the middle. So there is an opportunity here for any of you to ask any questions, or indeed, I don't think we've had any pre-submitted this time, have we, admin? So feel free, people, the floor is yours, or if not, we can move on. Councillor Baker, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, there are just a couple points I wanted to pick up really, and some of it flowed from stuff that happened at Budget Council. I just wondered if it's something we could look at some point on the Working Party as a way to progress some of the things that were raised. And there are 3 points really. One was around the idea of renovating the Manor Heath jungle experience, so perhaps transforming it a bit into a blue and green planet experience that had more of a focus on promoting sustainability and educating people whilst also being a kind of tourist attraction at the same time. Secondly was around this idea of real-time air pollution monitoring. I've been trying to push for it for quite some time now to adopt the Purple Air system here in Calderdale that could provide quite affordable cloud-based real-time monitoring of air pollution, which I think would help to highlight some of the issues around pollution with the borough, which is then, it links into climate change because it's about developing understanding of our impact on our local environment. And thirdly was the idea around the issue of kind of insulation and affordable warmth, because obviously, we're facing this cost of living crisis. There's moves by people to try and reduce the net zero contributions, and there's a push to kind of re-examine fracking at the moment. I believe, we absolutely need to be doing all we can around the issue of insulation. And, our group proposed that we set up a targeted insulation fund in Calderdale to tackle those in really suffering from fuel poverty. But unfortunately, council didn't accept that. And I wondered whether that was something we could look at again on the Working Party here.
Thank you very much for their all fantastic.
Sorry, a bit of a mouthful there, wasn't it? But
no, not at all. Thank you. And they're all brilliant suggestions. And you've somewhat jumped an agenda item, because we part of the governance review, we really want to encourage members to bring items for us to discuss. So I think they're really helpful suggestions. I know how passionate you are about air quality. And yeah, you're right, that's been a discussion at full council and through various scrutinies recently. So I think that's definitely something we could pick up.
Okay.
So let's put those on a kind of work agenda programme, and we can maybe pick up some of that when we do the governance review item. And it might be a handy place to perhaps.
Scott. Well, at least I've expressed it now, and they can be captured wherever the appropriate point is for them to be captured in the programme.
You have, it's out there. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions at this point? Thank you, Anthony Ray. Sorry, I didn't see you there in the corner.
Thank you, Scott. Anthony Ray from Calderdale Friends of the Earth. It's a question prompted by the fact that it's more difficult for members of the public to ask questions at this meeting, because it's a virtual meeting. And the question is, when it obviously doesn't just relate to this meeting, as to when it's likely that we're going to get back to physical meetings, because of course that does inhibit participation and so forth. And as just a particular example, there was a meeting of the Combined Authority Calderdale consultation, has a district committee meeting this afternoon, which was again virtual. I couldn't join it because the links didn't work. There were important items there related to transport that I wanted to possibly even ask a question about. So you can see how the absence of physical meetings is slowing up both the work and participation. And I just wondered, since anyway, let me leave that question there, Scott. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, was this a West Yorkshire Combined Authority meeting? Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure you're aware there's a climate, energy and environment meeting next week, which I hope you'll be attending. Yeah, fantastic. I think, and I don't, Debs, maybe you've got your hand up in relation to this question, but I'll try and start on it, and feel free to jump in. I think what became clear as part of the governance review was a real want from the group to start to meet in person. And I think perhaps the happy medium would be a blend of both to allow maximum participation. And we might decide how we want to manage that. But I think clearly in the early days of us meeting back after following our emergency declaration and the setting up of this group, those in-person meetings worked really, really well. I mean, we were actually getting fairly big audiences for a cabinet working group. So that's definitely something I think we want to pursue. I know at Wicker, Climate, Energy, Environment is in person. I don't know if they are running others virtually as well at this point. Debs, is there anything I've sort of missed there?
Yeah, it was just to say that under the item we've got on the review of the working party, there is a recommendation, because we heard loud and clear, I think, didn't we, Councillor Patient, that that people were keen, or some of the members of the working party were keen to reinstate face-to-face meetings. There were also members of the working party that explained to us that they wouldn't be able to participate if the meetings were face-to-face because of other commitments. So the recommendation that we will come on to, which is one of the recommendations in the item on the review, is that we have a mix. So we do absolutely go back to face-to-face meetings is the recommendation, but we also have some remote meetings as well. And by doing so, we're sort of trying to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the different members of the working party.
Thank you, Anthony. Just disappeared.
Scott, could I just make a point?
I was just going to invite you to. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, just a particular plea. I have a quite severe visual impairment, which stops me looking at computer screens or even smartphones. So I've been forced. That's why you don't see me. That's why I end up participating by telephone. I attended government meetings, which are hybrid meetings, and they work perfectly well. And you're excluding 8% of the population if you exclude people who have visual impairments and are prevented from using IT to actually enable that participation. So, I mean, I'm quite frequently attending hybrid meetings. I chair hybrid meetings. They work perfectly well. So I would urge that we go back to people making sure their diaries are organised properly to attend important meetings. And there's probably nothing more important for Calderdale and anywhere else on the face of the earth than dealing with the climate emergency. Because, you know, if we don't deal with that, then the rest of the things go to hell in a handcart, literally. Thank you.
No, thank you, Professor Robertson. A good point, well made. We do have actually the facilities at the town hall to run hybrid meetings. So hopefully that can be a touchpad for us doing some of that work. So people that can't attend online are still able to participate. But people like yourself are able to, and those who can. Hopefully that feels like a good route forward on that question. Is that okay? And then we can move to Rob, who also has his virtual hand up. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'm Rob Bayliss. I'm a former council officer and now retired, but very much engaged in climate change issues. Mine's a point for discussion, kind of also a bit of a question, in as much as I wonder whether the Working Party would have an appetite for considering a Ukraine solidarity program or initiative, or whatever it might be called, in which we link the need to tackle the energy crisis, the need to avoid Russian oil and gas, the need to tackle climate change, the need to reduce costs. I mean, in terms of the council, for example, I suspect that the energy bill is probably going to rise from, well, I might be out of date, but it's probably going to rise by about $1 million in my estimate as a result of the energy crisis. But I think there's a wider public initiative that could come here. We could actually promote to employees and to residents that they all reduce temperatures in their rooms by 1 degree to save on energy. I'd suggest that maybe the temperature of swimming pools could be reduced by 0.5 degree, because they are actually, if I remember rightly, they're up to about 20, I don't know whether it's 27, 28 or 29 degrees. So, you know, and you get complaints if the swimming pool's temperature is reduced by any large amount. So I'm suggesting 0.5 degree. Hopefully that's small enough to be hardly noticeable, but big enough to actually make a significant saving, because our Calderdale swimming pools do use a lot of energy. I'd suggest as I said, the public being encouraged to reduce their stats as part of this solidarity campaign. I'd suggest that the public and staff be encouraged to use public transport, car sharing, active travel, and if they drive on motorways with a fossil fuel powered car, then drive at 55 miles an hour. I'd encourage more working at home if that's changed since lockdown significantly. Switch off lights and computers when not in use. More insulation, draft. This touches on what Councillor Baker was talking about, draft proofing, but it doesn't have to be costly. It can be quite quick. And lastly, on my little shopping list, I'd suggest no outside heaters. And the council is guilty of this at Sorby Bridge Market. There's a cafe there which has heaters heating up the outside air to satisfy customers at the cafe there. I say it does. It did. I don't know whether that's been changed in recent times, but it certainly was heating up the outside air. So that's my little shopping list of a Ukraine solidarity campaign that also boycotts, well, reduces reliance on Russia. I'd actually add that I think it's Carbon Brief did a recent analysis that that worked out that if the whole of 23 million households in the UK reduced their thermostats by 1 degree, there wouldn't be a problem with Russian gas supplies in this country.
Thank you, Rob. There's some really good suggestions. I think some of them may already have been solved. I'm not aware that the heater is still there at Sorby Bridge, right. and I know certainly once the redevelopment of the market happens there, if there indeed is one there, that won't be happening. In terms of some of the internal stuff that's gone on since you left the council, some of the climate emergency sort of workers policy does a lot of what you're saying in terms of managing people working from home, car travel. And I know there's reaffirmance on computer screens about how to be energy efficient. But I think some of the bits that you did mention there, that long list, is something we could pursue, and definitely agree with you. The need to do something that feels quite in step with what's happening on the global stage in terms of how that's going to affect energy security and reliance on fossil fuels. Councillor Lynn, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just no, all good suggestions coming through. Actually, I think they're really excellent, and from Councillor Baker as well. I mean, I think it's also important to remember that actually quite a lot of that work is already going on. We've got a programme at the moment which is led by Richard Armitage, which is ensuring that particularly people over 65 are able to get additional insulation put into their homes. We've got a major programme of refurbishment of the Beach Hill estate, which is going to see not only all of the homes given extra insulation, pitch roofs and all the rest of it, but also having solar panels on the roof and so on. So I just wanted to be quite clear that some of the suggestions, including the ones from Councillor Baker, are actually already happening. The issue really is the extent is scaling them up. So we're already on with that. There are significant numbers of households that are already getting, you know, additional insulation measures and all the rest of it. But the fact is, it's still a drop in the ocean compared with the total amount of housing stock that we've got. So I totally support the point that actually there's a real need to ramp it up. But I just didn't want people perhaps looking at this thinking that that's now happening on the insulation front, or on the solar panel installation front, or on the trying to encourage people to use public transport more, and all the rest of it. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Council. And yeah, I mean, on that, and this has recently been announced, Rob, as a resident of Todmorden, you may or may not be aware that the project to decarbonise the Todmorden Leisure Centre has been funded. So we've had another successful win there through the Salix sort of decarb scheme. So that's putting energy efficiency works into it in terms of air source heat pumps, etc., as well as putting a microfiltration system. But I think your points about managing the temperature of the swimming pools is a really good one. For open water swimmers like me, I don't like it above 10 degrees, but I realise other people are a bit funny about temperatures, you know, when it comes to being warm. So that's something we can definitely take away. Be good to do perhaps a little bit of a gap analysis based on what you've said about what is already happening versus what we can do and what we can scale up.
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, what I was suggesting here was a programme of adding to what's already being carried out and linking it to Ukraine, so people realise they will actually be motivated to act more than they are currently. And this is aimed at the general public, but also staff and you know, everyone.
Thank you. Deb, shall we take that away and do a little bit more work on that and come back to this group? Perhaps via email will be the quickest way about how we might manage that. And Rob, feel free to feed in any of your thoughts.
Thanks very much.
Will, thanks Will for joining us. Just to let you know, we are on question time if indeed you do have a question at any point. But because I'm nice like that, I'm going to bring Councillor Regan Dickinson in first, even though I think Councillor Hutchinson had his hand up first.
Oh, I'm very happy to give way to Colin.
No, off you go.
All right, okay. It's I want to inspired by Rob's comments. Actually, I want to reintroduce my old hobby horse about maybe having a feasibility study done on integrating the existing weirs and turning them into hydroelectric. A feasibility study, I think, might be helpful, and it could be an opportunity for the commercialisation arm of the council to take it forward. I know Jenny's spoken of it before. I think there's a greater urgency at the moment with the increase in the cost of gas and fossil fuels, but it also, in my opinion, also has a bit of a nod towards Ukraine as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I wouldn't like to jump the gun too much on that, but I know the feed-in tariff issues are part of the barrier in terms of how we manage that. But it may be worth revisiting and thinking of it as a lobbying point to do some policy work on that. So perhaps, yeah, we'll note it down and come back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to reassure Councillor Baker about the jungle experience in Manor Heath Park. I had a guided tour around the plant collection 6 weeks ago, and prior to the installation of the air source heat pumps that are going in there. But I was reassured to see how healthy the plant collection was looking, because they've been able to tend to the plants while the public haven't been going round. And I'm meeting up with the managers there on Friday with a couple of volunteers to see if we can catalogue the collection, produce labelling for it and educational material because they are wanting to start to encourage school visits. And we recognise that it would be useful for teachers to have some material both before and after their visit to try and get the maximum out of their visit. So we are on with that. And we're looking at the possibility of getting more volunteers to help with interpretation of the collection and sort of maintenance, development of it as a teaching resource, very much as has been done in the Industrial Museum.
Thank you for some of that clarification. Councillor Hutchinson. I don't see any other hands up at this point. Professor Roberts, do you have anything more to add on this agenda item?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, no worries. Thank you for that. Okay, so moving on, we'll go to the first of the major substantive items, which is the review of the Climate Change Working Party. So I'll try and introduce where we're at with that for the benefit of people who have got no idea what that means. And sorry if for those that have all been through the process, which is most of you, if I repeat what's basically happened. So thank you all for being involved. We managed to get through each and every one of you, including even Finn, who we finally got round to. Sorry for missing you the first time round, and we really appreciate all of your input. After setting up the Climate Change Working Party, we really felt after 2 and a bit years and having COVID in the middle of it, that it was time for a governance refresh, just to make sure that it's fit for purpose. 2 landmarks sort of stuck out for us really to do that. One was COP26 happening, and the other was the development of the action plan, the climate action plan following the emission reduction pathway that we're currently going through. That's the next agenda item. So thanks to all of the members and the co-optees for taking part in that. Myself and Debs Harkin, Director of Public Health and Climate Change, conducted those interviews and asked you sort of a number of questions about your experience of the Working Party, some of your criticisms of the Working Party, about how it worked and about where you wanted to see it go. And we've gathered all of those points up that you brought to us and developed them into the paper that you see and hopefully have read, which sets out some next steps really about where we might want to go from here. So you were obviously all part of the process, and this will ultimately go to a cabinet recommendation about adopting some of the changes that we're suggesting. I think what we did was we discussed some of the value-based planning. We made sure about making sure that communities were more involved. But some of the key themes that came out were about people within the Working Party having a bit more say and delivering a bit more action as part of what we're doing here. There was a little bit about all of you using some of your skills from outside of the roles that you've been designated here and able to interact a little bit more with the process, as well as, I think, just making sure it's fit for purpose in terms of its governance going forward, and that it can strategically react to some of the quite big nitty-gritty processes we've got coming up, including the climate action plan. So in terms of the recommendations, bear with me one moment while my computer fails me at a critical moment. Some of the recommendations that came out on it and how it can be improved were sort of listed at the bottom. So obviously you all took part in the process, and it's really recommended for the first part that you're involved in the design of how it looks going forward. So we've done the planning, and I'm going to go through the items, and then we really want to come back to you and see if that fits what your vision of the future is. The second point, that's in order to enable that collaborative action and to maintain momentum, it's recommended that the task groups are established, reporting back to this group to then coordinate that delivery of action. That we kind of change what it's called in a way, that it ceases to become the Climate Change Working Party and becomes a little bit more of a, how would you say it, a place-based multi-agency climate action planning group. We probably won't call it that. We'll probably pick a slicker name for it, but that it's a little bit more able to adapt to the place that we need to be. And that's less about the council trying to do everything and actually making sure that we're a bit more of a multi-agency space for delivering action across Calderdale. We'll obviously still be hosting it, but I think through some of the interactions through the climate action plan and some of the changes we're proposing, hopefully it should be a little bit more fit for purpose. We want to review the membership on an annual basis. That's not something we've done so far, but I'm aware there are I'm aware we've had discussions about getting a broader diversity of membership, about parity of gender balance, and a lot more besides. So I think that's definitely something we need to look at going forward, and that's something this group should have oversight of at the same time as well, so it's fair. So we've said about making a multi-agency partnership, so formalising the programme of meetings to take place as it was originally envisaged before COVID hit, to take place every 3 months, but with an informal meeting taking place in the interim between there. So that's a cycle essentially of 6 weekly meetings. We may need to fit in more throughout that time, depending on what happens, or to react to events. But in terms of managing it, that's the formalised basis. That will really encourage, and I don't think we've probably done this properly so far, is to encourage members to put items of the agenda, formal and informal meetings. And Councillor Baker's beat you all to the jump on that one, which is fantastic. So I think we've got a good start for 10 in how to manage that. I think as well we need to think about that programme of partnership development and how it could and how we could think about who else needs to be involved in it and get their knowledge, skills and experience to support the work that we're doing, and that's about pulling other people into it. And so in that context, the terms of reference of the working party will be reviewed so that its role in that multi-agency leadership is explicit. The climate action plan will be place-based action plan for Calderdale rather than a plan for Calderdale Council. And I think that was something clear that came out through the discussions as well. So in light of that, it's recommended that the status of the group changes from a Calderdale Council Cabinet Working Party to a new multi-agency climate action partnership, to make arrangements, a direct line and ability to make recommendations to Calderdale Council Cabinet and the Council should be maintained through myself and the membership of councillors that are part of this group. And that the outcome of the review, refreshed terms of reference and membership and other recommendations will be set out in a paper for Calderdale Cabinet for approval at the start of the new municipal year. So I'll try not to go on too much. I realised I've fit a lot in there and we've still got a lot of items to discuss. Is there anything within the recommendations or the paper that anyone wants to pick up on? Is there anything they want to add or feels is missing at this point? Before that, I'm going to let Debs come in and say anything I forgot to.
No, it's not that you've forgot anything, Councillor Patient. It was just to say, I guess, just what a privilege it was for Councillor Patient and I to spend half an hour with each of you, most of you, or the people that you're deputising for. And actually, what for me came out really, really powerfully was the enormous set of skills and knowledge and expertise. And it's a really broad range of knowledge, skills and expertise that members of the Working Party have got. And that what's really critical moving forward is that we really enable, use those skills, utilise them, that knowledge, skills and expertise, and really enable members of the Working Party to really get involved. And I think the second reflection I've got, if it's all right, Councillor Patient, just as someone that's only ever worked here during COVID, so only ever met you online really, and never had those sort of conversations with you before, was that for each of the members of the Working Party got different reasons for getting involved and different motivations, and that they're different, and that's great, that's really good. In order to meet those aspirations and those different reasons for getting involved, then we probably need different ways for people to get involved. So, for example, some of the members of the Working Party want to be involved in the strategic work and want to be involved in overseeing the development and delivery of the action plan. Other members of the Working Party want to get involved in task groups, involved in specific pieces of work, and get really practically involved. And some members of the Working Party want to do both of those things. So it was just a real reflection that there isn't a single way that you want to be involved. You haven't got a single set of aspirations for the Working Party. And I suppose the recommendations, what we've tried to do is try and reflect everything that we heard in recommendations moving forward. But we're really keen, as Councillor Patience said, to hear your thoughts on, this is your group, to hear your thoughts about those recommendations before we take a paper, so that they can influence the paper that we take through to Cabinet.
Yeah, thank you. And just one final thing, I really endorse those comments, and it was, you know, we got round everyone, and it was about 12 meetings, so it was a significant amount of time and input, and it was really, really interesting to hear all of your stories. I missed one very significant point within the recommendations, which is that all co-optees should be given full membership status and voting rights. And I think that's really important. So there's a bit of a parity and equality going on going forward. So regardless of comments, I hope you feel that that's a positive move for taking it forward. Anthony, I'll go to you first, if I may.
Thank you, Scott. I always make 2 points at every meeting, don't I? Time and time again. The first is about the importance of focusing upon the numbers. If I do a search through the document for the word pathway, a pathway which takes us down from about 1 million tonnes a year now to about 500,000 tonnes by 2030. So you can imagine, you know, stepping down year by year. All the references in the document, the entire pack, are about this pathway study, but there's no reference to actually, well, okay, we now need to implement our way down through that pathway. So this is about a focus, isn't it, on that process, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. And the second point that I always make is about coordinating beyond Calderdale. Scott, you mentioned the fact that there's a meeting of the West Yorkshire Committee next week, and you would hope to see, and it's sort of not in there, so I will mention it on this item, because I probably will say the same points on the next item, which is about the action plan. So possibly you do need to have a reference in these recommendations to linking up to the West Yorkshire level, and of course it works in both directions. The most important recommendation that sort of touches upon this is it's sort of number 2. In order to achieve the outcomes in the climate action plan to maintain momentum, it's recommended that the task groups are established, reporting to the working party to coordinate the delivery of action. That's about as close as you get to talking about delivery of things. Delivery of carbon reductions. I'll come back to this and I'll finish now, but in the action plan, if you look at the task groups, so the one that I know most about is transport. The subject of those task groups, as defined in the action plan, will not deliver significant carbon reductions. And so at the moment, there's an inadequate focus upon the delivery of sufficient quantities of emissions tonnage reductions down through the pathway. And as we'll come on to, maybe the methods that we're proposing inside the action plan won't actually deliver those either. So, you know, my usual 2 sort of warnings here, that if we don't get this right, then I'm afraid the process, you know, it's obviously got, you know, an extensive set of 12 recommendations there, but it won't necessarily work. Sorry to say that.
Okay, thank you. We can take those points away. Sobering advice, but yeah, I think you're right. And I guess hopefully, if you're able to provide any follow-up details beyond what you've just said, we can try and make sure we're a bit more explicit within the report going forward, so that we don't have to, I guess, revisit that same argument all the time. It's well made, and I think it's timely that you do remind us of that. But clearly some of the points I think need to be put in there, Deb. So we'll make sure that we do that. Councillor Lynn.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, thanks very much to you and Debs for all the work you've done. I think you've done a good job. I think the recommendations are really good. Just a sort of two things really. One, I'm really pleased to see that this is being, it's kind of like being recast as something that is in which Calderdale Council plays a part, but actually this is about all of us. I mean, I'm just sitting looking at an email that my sister sent me from The Guardian today, and it's about Morriston Hospital. I used to live in Swansea, and it's about this fabulous report about the Brynwylach solar farm installation that they've got that is now powering Morriston Hospital's electricity needs for most of the time. Now that's absolutely fantastic. We've got our own hospital that's undergoing major changes at the moment, and I know it takes very seriously its commitment to to decarbonisation and everything. But for me, I think that we've also got a role as a climate change sort of place-based working party to kind of challenge all of our partners. Is what you're doing really going to make a difference? And so that was the first point I wanted to make. The second point I wanted to make is, can we go on some trips, please? Because I really think seeing is believing is very powerful. So I'd love us to find a way in which, for some of our organisations, some of our groups that we've got, our working party groups that we've got, if we're aware that there's exciting things happening in Birmingham or in Manchester or in Liverpool or even in Swansea, although that might be a bit far away, that we're prepared to say yes, once or twice we're going to go and take a look at it, because this isn't just, we are Calderdale focused, but there's things that we can learn from elsewhere. Thank you.
Definitely, that's really good advice, and I'm all for road trips. Was very lucky enough to go and visit the Norwich passive house development of social housing that they're in the process of building there. So I think that'd be a very good thing to do. Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on Jenny's road trip suggestion with a trip to, I think it's East Cheshire Council, who are actually using solar power to produce hydrogen to fuel one of their rubbish collection trucks. It'd be interesting to have a look at that.
Yeah,
so,
that's
one for
really
the list. I think it's East Cheshire Council.
Okay, thank you. Professor Roberts, do you have anything to add about following our conversation with myself and Debs and some of the recommendations about anything else that needs strengthening within there, or anything else you feel may or may not have been missed?
Well, I've got 3 points. Thank you very much. One of which Anthony's stolen my thunder on, which is about interactivity, because natural systems don't recognise local government boundaries, and neither do human systems like public transport. So I do think interaction with other places is really important. And if we get into that, we might even be able to find a way of funding certainly some research, applied practical research into some of the problems, because we could think about joining a thing called PCAN, the Place-Based Climate Action Network, which receives funding from the research councils, and we can talk about that out with the meeting. And I'm quite happy to have a conversation with yourself and Debs about that. And I do think we can learn a huge amount from each other. I always like the Rio Declaration mantra of think global, act local, but I always thought it ought to be extended about thinking and acting locally and globally. You need to do both things at all scales. That's my first point. Second point is very much about making sure that we embed the climate action in relation to all aspects of life, and not just regard it as something which applies to open space or transport or housing. I think there are some really good opportunities, and Debs hopefully can confirm this. Things like the move towards the West Yorkshire integrated care system. I was lucky last week. I was part of the little group who helped to write the green plan for the West Yorkshire integrated care system. So we can benefit from that. And certainly in terms of the new hospital, we ought to be actually making the point there in terms of how we drive that forward. And there are some really good people in CHFT who can help us to do that. But it needs to go into everything. One of the simplest examples I've come across is in primary education. Try to move back to neighbourhood primary schools to stop the lunacy of something like 30% in a typical district of private car movements being involved in taking children to and from school. If we can go back to neighbourhood primary schools, then the vast majority of children can walk to school. And that's the sort of thing we need to start thinking about. We need to have some common criteria. And the third thing, if I may, if you've not read anything else in 2022, can I really, really urge you go and read the International Panel on Climate Change, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, latest report published 2 weeks ago. And it's called Climate Change 2022, Impacts, Adaption and Vulnerability Summary for Policymakers. So it's in really user-friendly language. And we just need to recognize, it says, some development and adaptation efforts have reduced vulnerability across sectors and regions. The most vulnerable people and systems are observed to be disproportionately affected. That's exactly the point about poor people in Calderdale are disproportionately affected. Fuel poverty is now absolutely in crisis. And it says the rise in weather and climate extremes has led, and this is the most chilling line I've read for years, has led to some irreversible impacts as natural and human systems are pushed beyond their ability to adapt. And if that doesn't put real bones into the climate emergency resolution, I don't know what does. This can't wait. We need to get on with this, and we need to do it now, and we need to do it thoroughly across all aspects of our life. Sorry, it's a bit of a preach that, but I just think that is absolutely vital. So the report's great, but I would do more on penetration into other places. Certainly pick up Jenny Lynn's suggestion about go, look, see, be it actually or virtually, and certainly make sure that this is a matter for everything that the council, the private individuals and businesses and voluntary and community sector do. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Roberts. They're really, really helpful suggestions, and I can see Deb's busily scribbling down all of those things, and we'll hopefully weave them into the report that's going to go to Cabinet. So it's good to see some key themes emerging beyond what we've developed in terms of that interaction with other places. Clearly, Wicker and our other surrounding boroughs, including Greater Manchester, are going to be key to that as well. I'd second your point about everyone becoming familiar with the latest IPCC report. There is an easy read version available of it that gathers some of the main points if it's too much of a technical document, but it does make for some sober reading, and I think hopefully should really help to galvanise the work that we do going forward. Rob?
Mine's very quick. It may just have been touched on by Anthony, or it may have been more deeply, but I didn't quite get it. Basically, I'd say that the Working Party really has two functions that I don't think are covered quite clearly enough in the recommendations. One is to monitor what's going on in all aspects of the action plan, and the second one is to challenge poor progress, suggest how to improve. I did make a suggestion when we had our one-to-one about making the Working Party have the function of a steering group or programme board, because we are running here with the action plan a programme that needs to be monitored and challenged and problems solved when problems arise, it's kind of buried, I think, in the detail of the recommendations, I think, but I feel it needs to be more upfront.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah, thank you very much. I think we can re-emphasise some of those bits so it feels a little bit more clear about some of the challenge and lobbying aspects of what we need to do, and about some of that oversight. clearly what we ultimately want at the end of the day is for the adoption of the climate action plan to be something that people go away and take and use as a document, as they have done with the emission reduction pathway. But I think it needs more emphasis to make sure that that's understood. So thank you. Thanks for that, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Do we have anything more on that? I'm not going to pick on you, Councillor Baker, if you're still there, but I'm just mindful we've heard from all the other main groups and co-optees, and just if you have any brief ruminations on that, more than happy for you to come in. Equally, if you don't, then that's fine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the report is a sensible one. I think moving it away from just being entirely a cabinet working group to kind of having more of a place-based kind of multi-agency approach is, you know, and because it has to be owned by everyone, doesn't it? And, you know, I think that we're moving in the right direction there. And also, you know, the task of finished groups, because you can only achieve so much when you have a big group of people meeting infrequently. You need to really get into the details with smaller groups of people, focusing on those tasks of finished groups and trying to achieve action. And hopefully, you know, the changes will address some of the sense of frustration that some of us have felt at the kind of pace of change.
No, thank you for that. That's really helpful. And some of the bits about the task and finished groups, I think we'll pick up in the next agenda item about some of the membership of those and how we broaden out the consultees and other people that feed in and out on that. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we've had a really good discussion on that. We'll make sure we pick up the points that have been made by Anthony, Professor Roberts, and other people, and try and weave them seamlessly into what already exists. But just to re-thank you all again for your time and energy and thoughts in bringing that together. We finally got there, so much appreciated. Okay, moving on to, I think, what's the really critical item, and another critical item for this evening, is the action plan, the climate action plan item. And again, for viewers on YouTube that aren't familiar with the climate action plan, I'm just going to try and set the scene in terms of the context. So where we are at the moment and how we got here. So following the climate emergency declaration of early 2019 and the development of this group, we set up this group, which you've currently seen is going through a bit of a governance review. It's in line with some of the Vision 2024, which is a lot of the corporate work that happens inside the council about where it wants to be. But actually, after that came development of our targets for decarbonisation and how we want to get there. We used some official scientific reports to help endorse that, and we also went in line with Greater Manchester Combined Authority and West Yorkshire to be in step with how they did it. So our target, as opposed to the government's 2050, is 2038 with significant progress by 2030. In that time as well, we got an outside consultant to develop an emission reduction pathway, which is a science-based pathway of how to get to net zero. And I think that's something that we're going to be really focusing on through the development of the action plan, not just the values stuff, but very much rooted in the science. And I think that was something that came out in the action plan workshops that we've run already, which is 2 of them. To make sure that we do have those value-based data sets in there, which are going to be important to reaching people, but they're very, very much locked into the data that we've already got about how we need to get there. So we need to be clear about what we want and what we want to do next. Part of it is going to be utilising these task and finish groups to reach out further beyond our group and widen the scope of how we speak to people. We've developed some themes which, based on the couple of workshops we've run already, and they do deviate slightly from what we're in the action plan in terms of a bit more of a deep dive. So hopefully you've become familiar with some of them already. The themes that came out were the idea of a shared voice, which is that being proposed as a central group which would respond to feedback from the specific themes and that group would pick up responsibility for linking local work to regional and national strategies. I think we touched upon a little bit of that before, and that's going to be a really important part of how we do this going forward. That's kind of that lobbying arm and that challenge and making sure we're in step. The second one is about, I'm not going to do the second one, I'm just going to say them in. We've also thought about the green economy, and that working group would focus on working with businesses and social enterprises. It'd work out how we can make sure the skills needed for low carbon work are there for our local workforce, and consider how we can switch to the circular economy, reduce food miles and food footprint, and support businesses to become low carbon and flood resilient. A lot of this has been picked up in talking about the Ukraine and the idea of, you know, food security. The Ukraine has 10% of the wheat distributed to the rest of the world, and clearly there's going to be a knock on for that. And ditto, we've already spoken about the energy crisis and how the Ukraine situation exacerbates some of those worries. And I think we'll talk more about social and climate justice in the next item, but clearly that needs to be rooted in what we're doing. There's a community climate action level, and I think we're already doing a lot of that, and that's going to be specifically about reach and engagement, and making sure that we're using our comms channels and the effectiveness of this group to reach out to people, to enable access to funding pots, to enable access to make changes. And that might involve shaping projects with schools or young people, and specific neighbourhood and ward level action. And I know Councillor Baker spoke about the need for very, very localised versions of climate action plans. So hopefully that'll pick some of that out, as well as some of the equalities issue in making sure that Black and minority ethnic communities, disabled communities are present and heard. And I think that's really important in the context of this meeting. Warm and dry homes, so that group would look at everything overcoming specific challenges around retrofitting. I think we have 69,000 homes in Calderdale that need to be retrofitted. We're chipping away at them with projects like Beach Hill, and other new developments, but clearly there needs to be massive work in making sure that happens for our low-level housing, as well as some of our bigger housing built around hearths. So there's quite the challenge there. Transport, and these are the big ones. Obviously, home energy, transport, and that would be looking how we deliver safe and attractive streets and sustainable transport for everyone. And that might include how we can change to encourage cycling and walking, and look at public transport and electric vehicles. Some of this has already been worked out in the green and healthy streets policy, but we need to clearly do lots more work to enable that being embedded across Calderdale. And of course, sort of land and nature as well. We have a big opportunity to do quite a bit there. We've got a lot of uplands, an opportunity for sphagnum moss planting or moorland restoration, but also challenges there with how a lot of the moorland's already used. So that'll be progressing work with partners and landowners to restore nature, to do more NFM, and it's likely to cover schemes that support species, biodiversity on a landscape or catchment scale. So I guess what we want to do is make sure that there's a few questions really that we want to ask the group, three main ones really. The first one being, are you happy with how the themes have been developed based on the current workshops that we've run? We will be also going to Climate Emergency Officer Forum as well tomorrow to ask them and running similar workshops with them to hear their voices, because we need to be clear to make sure we speak to everyone that we possibly can do. And that includes a lot of those diverse voices within the council already delivering change. And that's not just the environment projects team, that's people within highways, that's people within woodland management and trees, people within finance, all across the council. So we have a really good turnout for Climate Emergency Officer Forum. So are you happy with the themes is number one. Two is, who should we reach out to develop them? And that is part of the consultation of taking the action plan going forward. So basically, who's missing from this group who may or may not want to feed into what people from the business world should be here, what people from environmental action groups should or shouldn't be here. So really interested in your thoughts about who should be on it. And I guess just general comments on the content of the report. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at it. There's a lot there, but we've tried to gather what you've said. And hopefully that's it really. Appreciate there's a couple of bits that didn't make it into it. And Rob, I know you wanted stuff there about local and healthy food. I guess we felt that was picked up within some of the other items, and there's already a bit of a forum in terms of the Calderdale Food Network that's already dealing with some of those things, but happy to take challenge if you feel it's needed. So I'll leave it there and just, I think, throw it over to everyone for comments at this point. Appreciate there might be some doubling up from the last item, but it really sort of feels like a good start that we've had. We're going to be doing even more sort of workshop and diving into it and making sure that the climate action plan at the end of it is robust. We have been looking at other work elsewhere in other local authorities about how they've developed theirs, and it seems like we're in lockstep with some of the best of them about how we're managing it and wider consultation. So I'll stop talking at that point unless Debs, I've missed anything. Nope. So I will start to take comments at this point. And Peter, I'll come to you next, but I'll start with Councillor Hutchinson just because I saw him first.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I might have missed it, but I don't think we have anyone representing the business community on this here this evening. And I really do think they have to be have a prime place within this place-based committee that you're talking about, because it is very much chicken and egg situation that we need to make progress on this, but we need the skills locally to be able to retrofit houses, to be able to service electric vehicles, and do all the work on the local electricity supply and all the other things. There's so many big, we need to make sure that the industries that we have in Calderdale are the industries for the coming decades, not the industries for the past century. So I know we've got the Calderdale Climate Challenge College in Todmorden, but by itself, I'm not sure that that's sufficient. And so working with the educational sector in Calderdale College, Leeds Beckett University, with their business centre in near the Peace Hall, and using the public sector to sort of provide a test bed or sort of pump priming of these jobs within Calderdale. I know that there's heat pump installation going on in 6 public buildings in Calderdale. How much of that work is actually being done by Calderdale businesses or by local businesses? I don't know, but these are opportunities to actually bring on this sector within Calderdale, and I think it's important that we do so and that we engage very actively with that community.
No, that's really good. Thank you. And yeah, that's good to know. And I think it's going to be interesting to figure out which members of the business community we want to ask, really. Clearly, we've got a couple of anchor employers here. I can think of a few off the top of my head. And it'd be good to make sure we speak to the right people to get them around the table. I just missed one thing as well, which is just to really thank Kat, who a lot of you are familiar with, for the work she's done in pulling together the workshops and the report. I think she's also kind of made it really explicit in the documents that actions that came out of the workshop will be assessed against the emission reduction pathway, and there'll be a more technical appendix included. We did also kind of say that it's important to recognise that the ERP has policy recommendations for the council, which are really important to be reflected in the plan, but that the plan is about the borough, not just the council, and I think hopefully that's come through in it. Peter, Do you have anything to add? Sorry, Professor.
Well, sorry, no, Peter's good enough, Scott. I only ever get called Professor Roberts when I've done something wrong. I mean, the point about business is really important. The people who are most vulnerable are small and medium enterprises. The big businesses are already working on dealing with many of the climate change challenges because they know that their investors will require it. I mean, just look at what happened in terms of the investment community over the last 2 years. Basically, ESG, environmental and social governance in business, has really taken root, especially in the larger businesses. But it's the small and medium enterprises who don't have specialist people who need help and support. And we need business collectives, because we're beginning to see now procurement requirements requiring businesses to demonstrate that they're actually operating at high levels of environmental and social governance. But my substantive, so I think the point that was made previously is really, really important. My substantive point is, I think the themes are absolutely fine, but there's a cross-cutting theme, which, you know, if you look at those themes as columns, then there's also a cross-cutting aspect, which needs to apply to everybody and everything, and I think we just need to develop a set of basic screening criteria before you take action. So it doesn't matter whether we're looking at housing, whether we're looking at transport, whether we're looking at healthcare or whatever else. There are common screening criteria about things like procurement, things like distance. What are the implications for movement of this proposal? And I just think we need to think longer and harder about those cross-cutting criteria that people will need to think about in order to actually manage things like their energy use and so on and so forth. And the whole question of embodied carbon, I mean, that's totally ignored, but people don't realize exactly how much carbon is embodied in building structures, in motor vehicles, in fridges, in washing machines, in television sets, in mobile phones. And these are common criteria that we need to screen across everything. So it doesn't matter whether it's in any of those columns, any of those thematic columns, the common criteria need to be there. And the final point is, if we think about housing, we certainly should be trying to up the game in terms of making sure that all new houses in Calderdale are built to something which approaches net zero. We've got a huge task. I can give you some real figures. In my other job, it's costing us about £52 million to take older council stock from SAP bottom D to top C bottom B out for 2,000 homes. Just do the arithmetic. This is a lot of money. But what we mustn't do is add to the climate change burden by allowing new developments to simply be at SAP level, whatever. And I think that goes again for everything in terms of public buildings, private buildings, and so on. But there are lots of other things, and I'm very happy to sit down and work out some screening criteria. So I'll put my money where my mouth is, Scott.
No, that's really good. Thank you very much. Yeah, and clearly we need to be very laser focused on this, because we can't talk to every business. You know, we already work with Wicker and the Chamber of Commerce on a lot of these things. So I think we just need to give a little bit of thought about who might be best to be part of this, and to enable some of that wider engagement with other business within the group. Sorry, I can see this has generated a lot of interest. I'm sorry, I don't know who came first, but I am going to pay deference to those who haven't spoken yet. Hope that's all right, and everyone can be patient. Patrick, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, I think some of the points have already been made eloquently, but I was going to talk about the absence of a business voice in this. Clearly, it has to be someone who can speak kind of on the behalf of particularly small business, as Peter suggested. But I think the big businesses are also important for the reasons that Peter has also alluded to, because their supply chains inevitably go back through small businesses, and we need to know how they're shaping that up and how perhaps small business can be supported elsewhere. And I know you talked about working with the chamber and so on, but I think some of those voices might be useful in these task groups as well, directly, rather than at a secondary point.
Yeah, definitely. And Federation of Small Businesses, I think, are another good one, because we've got a lot of sole traders and people in and around Calderdale. In fact, they make up probably the bulk of the employers within Calderdale. So it's going to be important to try and gather some of their voices as well. Let me have a look. Will, would you like to come in?
Yeah, cheers. I think on just who should be involved in these groups, I'm also going to shout out the Climate Challenge College, because a lot of the work they do is great, but we do need sort of other educational providers like the Calderdale College, but also like head teachers or governors. I know Youth Scrutiny has a lot of connections with those groups, and they understand, and whether that's sixth forms or colleges or schools, and they sort of understand that aspect of it very well. On the land use and nature, I don't know what Calderdale sort of NFU reps or representation is like at the moment, but they're probably quite a good group to reach out to that have a lot of connections with agriculture and farming. It might be quite nice to have council officers from across the council involved in these groups. Because when we look at the council's estate, but they have connections beyond the council as well. And I think quite quickly on the shared voice, I know PCAN was mentioned. There's the Yorkshire Humber Climate Commission was set up a year and a bit ago, I think, that is doing a lot of work in Yorkshire Humber at the moment. Rika's just been asked to be a commissioner. I think it's Jack Hemingway, who's the Wakefield councillor, who's the vice chair for West Yorkshire. They do a lot of great work and have a lot of connections with groups we can work with, even just sort of nicking ideas from people. They'd be quite good to talk about in the shared voice group.
No, that's fantastic. We do actually have another good person within Calderdale called Matt Taylor, who does a lot of work with the farmers networks, who I think is very keen to get involved with. But we shouldn't just keep it, within our own small networks. I agree, we need to take a bit of a wider view of that. Thanks for that, Roseanne.
Thanks, Scott. I haven't been involved in this piece of work before, but it all looks very impressive. I just wanted to follow on the sort of comments of Will, and I suppose particularly endorse more attention and more focus on kind of schools and young people, and their participation. Slow the Flow is getting increasingly kind of involved in this area. We're in the process of developing kind of education resources or lessons on natural flood management to feed into key stages 2 and 3 of schools. That's due to be rolled out next year. And we received kind of specific funding to go out and market this to schools, which we'll be doing over the next number of months. So just in terms of maybe an opportunity there to do some working to avoid duplication if you wanted to identify more sort of contacts in schools who are interested in this. I know that kind of the initial work that's been done by one of my colleagues on the board, there's an awful lot of interest. So I think that there are opportunities here to build more links with schools.
No, that's really good. Thank you very much for that. Finn.
Yeah, sorry, just in terms of where this could be on, I mentioned several times, I think the trade union movement should be involved. We have a Calderdale TUC, there's some good people there who are interested in climate change, that we probably could get on board. Although there is a food network, I think it would be good to have the food sector involved in this group too, to have some crossover. Can I just mention that Calderdale Green New Deal has got a very active retrofit group. Has done a lot of work already, and if we are going to focus more on retrofitting, there's definitely some expertise there that we could benefit from, and we have done some financial modeling and so on that perhaps we can have a look at. But in terms of trade unions, the trade union movement here in Yorkshire and Humber have just produced a new booklet or a small book for £5 on climate jobs. And if anyone is interested, the first 10 I bought has already been sold, and the next 10 is coming this week. So if you know anyone who are interested, I have some spare copies available. Thanks.
Thank you, Finn, for that. Yeah, already got my copy and can recommend it. So it's a really good read and really interesting and be helpful for members of this group. Anthony.
Thank you. And so back to my two subjects, my two themes. The first is on numbers, and these two themes apply even more to the action plan than they do. Clearly, the working party or the partnership should be focused on delivering the action plan. So just going to page 33 of the reports pack. It does talk about the pathway. It talks about getting down to net zero by 2038, significant progress by 2030, and so forth. And it mentions the study. That's the point at which you need to make sure, or we need to make sure, that there's a picture that we can take, for example, from the Calderdale study of that pathway with some numbers attached. So you start to introduce numbers into it. If you go a little bit earlier in the document, on page 27, it is saying the right things, using the CERP as a guide. What are the high carbon areas that need to be prioritised, and what are the first steps? And then it says develop a long list of actions. So there are there's an opportunity to begin to bring into the foreground the need to focus upon the numbers, but the contradiction, if you just go a few stages, a few pages earlier, when you talk about the various task groups, and that's something I've mentioned when I was speaking before. So on the transport group, it says this would work out how we deliver safe and attractive streets and sustainable transport for all. This might include considering how streets could change to encourage cycling and walking, and also look at public transport and electric vehicles. And there's something, so that's on page 25, and then there's a table which mentions these sorts of things on page 26. The problem is, and I had this conversation with Kat, Scott, is that those actions, I appreciate that they're important and they are attractive, but they do not deliver the quantity of transport emissions tonnage reductions that are fundamental to achieving the pathway. And you'll know, Scott, I think you do, that the audit of Friends of the Earth that said if you don't achieve at the West Yorkshire level the transport emissions reduction, then the entire climate emergency collapses. And that's why this isn't sort of just a little debating point as to whether you focus upon this or that, the other. All I'm saying is that there needs to be a consistency between the approaches to the numbers, which makes sure that if there is to be a transport task group, that it is going to at least begin to engage with how, the quantity of emissions reductions that you're going to need and where you get them from. It is most likely, and Friends of the Earth is saying this at the West Yorkshire level, that if you do this exercise, you'll discover that you can't achieve the scale of the reductions you need, which is a very pessimistic outcome. But it's better to know that at the start of 2022 than in 23 or 24 or whatever. So that's my point about numbers. The other point was about the links between Calderdale and West Yorkshire, and as you know, it sort of goes on up doesn't it, to London. And I talked about the importance of the Calderdale process, including something about West Yorkshire. Of course, it works in the opposite way round as well.
Yeah.
Scott, if you go to page, I think it's 49 I have here of the mayor's plan, 49. That's towards the end of the mayor's plan. It talks about what West Yorkshire councils will do, and it talks about producing and extending climate and environmental roadmaps and action plans following declarations and so forth. There's about 10 things that the mayor's plan says West Yorkshire councils should be doing. But say on the agenda for next week's meeting of the West Yorkshire Climate Committee, there isn't any connection or reporting as to what are the West Yorkshire councils doing. There's no sort of coordination or connectivity going in the opposite direction. I'm not sure how that would work, but I'm just not clear at the West Yorkshire level whether the mayor and the combined authority are reaching down to the districts and their action plans in the same way that the districts should be reaching up to the West Yorkshire Climate Plan, and to try and get them working together, because otherwise you're just going to have five district councils and the West Yorkshire process doing things that are vaguely linked or vaguely not linked, and therefore you won't get synergy and you won't get proper coordination. So it might be a good idea, Scott, to at next week's meeting just to he's just run out of the room. If you could just sort of think about that, Scott, because this synergy between these two processes is going to be fundamentally important for Calderdale, but also for West Yorkshire as well. Thank you.
No, that's a really good point. Well, I wasn't running away. That was my child asking me for something, to which I duly closed the door. So no, that's really good, and hopefully something I can take next week, I think, as an action point. I mean, some of that I think begs some of the questions about whether some of the themes there might be better embedded in the main group as opposed to being like a side thing. So that idea of the shared voice perhaps being something where we speak as a bit more of a cohesive unit. I know we've spoken about the power of lobbying, and it does feel like it needs to be more embedded within this group. So perhaps that's something we can sort of take forward. But I think you're dead right. I'm totally with you on that, and I think the numbers are really important. So although we do want to encourage all the active travel work, there is some stuff there, isn't there, about really pushing back on some of the policy stuff about decarb within transport. So we'll take that and perhaps re-emphasise that a little bit more strongly. And as said, I'll take that to West Yorkshire Combined Authority next week as well and make that point on your behalf. And I'm sure you'll be there too. Rob, we've got you.
Thanks, Chair. I may have missed something here because I've only been able to see this document tonight, but I don't see anything in the themes about actually looking at what the council's doing. It may be a cross-cutting theme, or it may be covered by an internal working party. But it does seem that if the working parties to hold all stakeholders to account, it should be holding the council to account, and there should be a theme that embraces that. Whether it's cross-cutting or separate theme, I don't know. My second point is regarding food. You might not be surprised that I'm not happy that it's not a theme in its own right, albeit I do accept that there's cross-cutting elements to it. But I think we've got to be careful with food, because local is all very well, and I fully support local food as important for food security, apart from other issues. But the local aspect of food is minuscule compared to the total emissions that are associated with diets. And the problem is that the ERP focuses on scope 1 and 2 emissions, but not scope 3. And forgive me if that's, I hope everyone understands what I mean by that. But basically, scope 3 is the supply chain emissions that are not accounted for in the focus of the ARP. And I've raised it before. I think food is an important thing because it's actually up there with transport as a very important issue to address with regard to climate change. So I'm disappointed that it's not got a higher profile in the themes. The next point I'd like to make is land and nature. That again embraces food, I realise that, but my point is somewhat different, and that is I know the council has on more than one occasion looked at the potential for renewable energy technologies to be located on land in Calderdale. I don't think that we should forget about that. We've had our little upsets over that in the past. I don't want to dwell on that, but I think that that should not be out of the focus of that particular group, because there might be things in there that, or opportunities rather, that have not previously been identified. And I think Councillor Dickinson identified one, which was the potential for hydro on weirs. I think he was thinking about Brighouse in particular. But there's other opportunities, especially if the government is relaxing the restrictions on wind turbines on land as opposed to offshore. Lastly, there's a focus on homes, very rightly, but I don't think that the buildings are in there really as clearly as they should be anyhow, because there's a lot more buildings than just housing. So somewhere in the themes, those buildings need to be covered. Yes, partly to do with business, but there's other buildings that need to be considered. Sorry, there is one other point I'd like to raise, which is SMEs. Professor Roberts, I'm really pleased that he raised that. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine. But what I'd like to suggest is that SMEs are not a coherent group of organisations that you can contact the FSB about or whatever, or consult the FSB about. A lot of I think you made the point actually, Councillor Patient, that a lot of SMEs in Calderdale are small, very small. And rather than treat those as businesses, may I suggest that those come under the community theme? Because they're basically ordinary people running small businesses, and so they're probably better tackled as in the community rather than thought of as, I mean, yes, they are businesses, but I think you might get more traction tackling them through the community theme. Thanks very much.
No, that's really good, and I wonder on that. And clearly, it's a movable feast at the moment in terms of how we're developing the themes. And a tweak from homes to buildings and homes wouldn't be the end of the world, and I guess just changes some of the discussion there. But perhaps in terms of who we're asking while we're thinking about sustainable food solutions, we should perhaps be inviting people from maybe CropShare or Incredible Edible or similar sort of groups that are doing stuff like that, and hopefully they can help, I guess, shine a bit more of a light in terms of food security and food poverty and how that's going to work going forward. Thanks, Rob. Deb's first, if you.
Yeah, thanks. I was just to pick up on the food, which is really helpful. That's been a really helpful discussion. And just to let you all know that Calderdale is working now towards, through our food network, we're working towards a Sustainable Food Places Silver Award, and that has a number of elements that really brings together the sort of procurement of food, yes, the local food, the diet issues, the sort of sustainability of the food system, but also food poverty and food security. But I think that's a really good suggestion about some sort of connection between that work that's going on and potentially wherever it fits in this system. An explicit connection, I think, would be really valuable. And then just the other thing, it's been really helpful listening to the discussion, and just thinking really about the framing of the action plan, and the framing of, and I think it's Anthony's comments have been really helpful to help me anyway think about some of the framing. So it's about putting the numbers, if you like, on equal level with the things that might motivate people to get involved, to change their behaviour and take their action. And it's almost those two things potentially go hand in hand as we're presenting this. So there's why might we want to do this? What might appeal to people, to the public, the broader partners to change behaviour, and the numbers sort of with equal. So thanks, Anthony. It's really helpful listening to you for us to sort of get that clear. So that was all I wanted to say. Thanks, Councillor Patience.
No, good stuff. I'm going to try and pull this to a bit of a close, but it's been really good, just because we really want to hear from Hilary Turley, who's been really patient. But I saw Councillor Lynn's hand. Did you, or have you put it down? And then Councillor Baker. Councillor Baker, do you want to come in?
Oh, I mean, I'll try and be very brief. I guess on the food, I wondered if it'd be better to phrase it in terms of lower, like, greenhouse gas emission food rather than the emphasis on local, because my understanding was like the transport element of food production is actually quite a slim amount of its total greenhouse gas impact. It's actually more like the choice of food and, you know, the efficiency of production method and stuff. Although I think, as Rob said, there might be many other benefits to local, and I certainly do enjoy lots of the locally produced food here in the borough.
Yeah, I'll second that, exactly. Okay, well, I mean that's brilliant, and thank you. I think we've had a really sort of good discussion on there. I think most of you have seen the next steps about how we'll take that forward, and we'll develop a long list of actions and then review them based on the technical ERP work. And then come back together with the task and finish groups to do a little bit more work on it, and then go into that wider consultation period where we'll gather even more voices. So hopefully it'll be a really collaborative sort of experience throughout the whole thing, and we'll come out at the other end with an action plan fit for purpose and fit for Calderdale. So thank you all for feeding into that process. The recommendations ultimately will be that the action plan is written and approved by whatever this working party becomes known as post May elections. So thank you all for your input on that. And moving on to the next item, which is Hilary Turley. Thank you very much for joining us from All One Collective, who I'm very familiar with. Do an awful lot of work in terms of community outreach, specifically around social and climate justice. And I know you guys do a lot of outreach and work with communities perhaps that don't normally get a voice when talking about these kinds of things. So over to you. I won't steal any of your thunder. Feel free to speak to the group, and we'll think about how we can weave some of your thoughts into our next steps. Hilary.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, okay. I'm just going to share my screen for a couple of slides. Okay, great. So yeah, as Councillor Patience said, my name is Hilary Turley and I work for All One Collective and Lab. So I've been invited here this evening just to tell you about the work that we're doing in partnership with the Climate Challenge College at Todd College. So we're doing community engagement work in Calderdale to create and enabling environment for the college to draw a diversity of people to the Green Futures course that's running there, but also to engage communities on climate change with a particular focus on low income areas who have largely been left out of the climate change conversation. So I'm going to start off by giving you a bit of background to our work, and then talk through the pilot project we've been delivering since June 2021 and what we've learned from it so far. So we're a small social enterprise based in Todmorden, and we've been working in communities in Calderdale since 2017. And a large part of what we have been doing is running workshop programmes to support the development of social action projects in communities. And we were part of the British Council's Active Citizen programme for 3 years, which is a social action leadership programme. So we've got 2 strategic priorities, one of which is promoting active citizenship, and the other which is addressing climate justice. We started working on climate justice in 2019 when we ran an active citizens programme with a focus on local environmental issues and climate change. In previous programmes, we'd found that people had spoken a lot about local environmental issues. So they were talking about litter and fly tipping, pollution. But when we tried to recruit for this programme, it was really hard to get people to come from low income areas, and also particularly from Black and minority ethnic communities as well. We weren't totally surprised by this, but we then at this point really wanted to sort of explore more about climate change and why this wasn't really being engaged with within marginalised communities. We wanted to look at how we could work with communities on this issue and to connect it to their daily lives. And we know obviously at a global level and a local level, people experiencing poverty and inequality bear the brunt of the impacts of climate change, and yet they're often less heard within the debate and within the conversations, and can be much harder to engage. Obviously, there's a variety of reasons around this, but one key thing I think is around if you're trying to work out how to survive each day, how to feed and clothe your kids, then climate change can feel like a far off problem that you don't really have the headspace to deal with. So in this sense, we're taking a local climate justice approach to our work because we're looking at how we can bring about change which reduces poverty and inequality whilst also addressing the climate crisis. And we see these issues as completely interconnected and not separate from each other. So the work that we're doing with the Climate Challenge College has been funded by the National Lottery Climate Action Fund. And we've developed sort of 3 streams of work within this project, which is a pilot project for 18 months. So climate conversations is the work that we're doing with voluntary and community sector organisations to think about how climate change and climate justice relates to their work. So local voluntary and community sector organisations are in different ways working on issues of poverty and inequality. And the workshops that we run are about bringing an environment and climate lens to their work. So we run workshops which are about giving organisations space to make the connections between their work, the social change they're trying to create, and climate justice, and to think about how they can integrate this into their work and how they can bring the communities that they are working with into the conversation and to have their voices heard. We're also involved in running community events. So we've been exploring different ways of engaging communities in North Halifax and in Park Ward. And we've been looking at addressing local needs and interests, as well as integrating conversation and awareness raising regarding local environmental issues and climate change. And then the third part of our work is around working with the students on the Green Futures course. So developing their skills as champions of the programme so that they can go out into their own communities and to raise awareness about what they've been doing, the potential for green jobs and the green economy, and also action on climate change as well. So just to say a bit more then about the climate conversations, we've run 6 workshops so far with a wide variety of voluntary and community sector organisations. And at each workshop, we've had around sort of 10 to 15 people. So we've been speaking to quite a wide variety of organisations, from North Halifax Partnership to Halifax Opportunities Trust, Healthy Minds, the VAC Peer Support Network, Women's Centre, just to name a few. And we've sort of started as a way of having two parts to this. So the first session has been about giving organisations a chance to sort of take stock, to think about what's been going on over the last couple of years. So obviously COVID being a key part of that, thinking about COVID recovery and the possibility of a green recovery and the issues facing the people that they're working with, as well as potential opportunities that exist for green jobs and a green recovery from COVID. We've also used and explored the idea of donut economics in this workshop as a way of visually representing the connection between the social foundation, what we all need for a good life, and the need to achieve this within the Earth's planetary boundaries. And then we also give space for organisations to think about the actions they could take within their workplace and the support that they need to do this. What we've learned so far is that organisations are really engaged with climate change as an issue, and are thinking really hard about how to bring more people into the conversation and with the communities that they work in. They recognise that there's a need to bring an environmental lens to the work that they're doing, and there's been particular kind of strong connections between the work that's being done around health and well-being and the environment. And there's also been loads of interesting ideas. So just to throw out one, someone from who was working, I think, at Queen's Road Neighbourhood Centre talked about the idea of running a campaign in Park Ward to get people to walk to mosque on a Friday rather than using their cars. So these are small actions, but important ones for engaging wider numbers of people. People have also expressed frustration and some sort of trepidation really about how to talk about climate change within the communities that they work. And again, they kind of reinforce this idea that it can be really hard to do this when people are dealing with the sort of daily reality of living in poverty. People have talked about really needing to do climate change awareness raising by stealth, and say that it's really important to start with the issues that feel more relevant and immediate to people. So they've talked about food, saving money through saving energy, fuel poverty, and dealing with local waste issues. A number of people within local VCS organisations have also said that they want and need to know more about climate science and the facts and figures behind climate change, as well as the impacts of it. And others have wanted to have support around how to have more effective conversations about climate change and related issues within communities. Many organisations have also talked about how they really want to understand how they can make their organisations more environmentally sustainable. So they're also asking for technical and practical support around how they can actually do this and how that can have sort of meaningful impact. And through a session with the VAC peer support, they would like a regular opportunity to meet and learn more about climate change, to develop action plans for their organisations, and to learn from organisations and projects in other parts of the country who are also doing work of this kind. As a result of some of the climate conversations, there have been some organisations that have then now sort of embarking on organising local community events, which focus on trying to engage people that they work with on the issue. Just to say as well about the second part of the climate conversation sessions, these have been delivered with North Halifax Partnership and people linked to the Inclusive Economy team at the council. And we developed this by in response to people's concerns about not really knowing about how to talk about climate change. So drawing on All One Collective's skills in community dialogue, we developed and adapted some training from Climate Outreach and Information Network's Talking Climate project. And the sort of premise of this is that day-to-day conversations about climate change really matter, even when they feel insignificant because they're part of wider social change. And that these kinds of conversations need to happen across all communities. And that it's really important to do this to build social consent for climate action and policies. And that there's a real need to break climate silence, because although many people are engaged, there are still significant numbers that don't ever talk about it, even though they might be thinking about it. A part of this is also around the idea that facts and figures are not enough. They're a really important part of understanding the causes and impacts of climate change, an important part of the puzzle in engaging communities, but they're not the whole story. So research from the social science of climate change communications has highlighted that people are also really strongly influenced by the stories that we hear around us, our values and the connections we form. So taking those ideas, we've developed a workshop where we use storytelling and dialogue and the way of finding common ground as a way of having conversations, and the idea that we need to keep doing that, and that's an important part of action. So feedback from this has been positive. People have found it really useful to have tips for actually having these kinds of conversations and to sort of go out there and try and do that. And I think the storytelling has also been useful. Last week, for example, we ran a session with the inclusive economy team, and one person said they weren't really interested in talking about climate change and found it quite boring, and probably wouldn't bother to do it. But once they got involved into a storytelling activity, they told a great story about installing solar panels on an orphanage in Pakistan that they support, and suddenly felt more connected to the issue. So I think that highlights the importance of people finding ways into this issue that makes sense to them and that has something that is meaningful. And also we found that these conversations have motivated people. So just things like around sharing small actions like eating less meat or driving a car doesn't really address the scale of the problem, but it does enable people to feel that they can do something and to continue to engage on the issue rather than just feel hopeless. We found as well that within these sessions, it's important to acknowledge some of the more difficult feelings that people have, the sense of hopelessness and cynicism that change can happen. And it's just important to give some space to that, but also to create a space where people feel like they don't have to be an expert to talk about this stuff, and that it's relevant to everyone. They don't necessarily have to have the most technical or scientific understanding of things to be able to talk about it. I'll just tell you a bit then about the community event that we have run so far and the ones that we have coming up. We ran a community event in North Halifax in Leamount, in an area that I don't think has had any events which have been focused particularly on environmental issues. And we did this in partnership with North Halifax Partnership and the community organiser Natalie Ratner and local councillor Danielle Durrans. And the idea was to just really try and bring people into Leamount to create a space that was welcoming and inviting and fun for families, and to deliver interactive awareness-raising activities on the local environment and climate change, as well as connecting to other issues that people were dealing with. So working in partnership with North Halifax Partnership was obviously really essential for All One Collective in all of this, because they are the people that have the relationships in the community. They're trusted and they understand the issues that people are dealing with. There was a focus on waste because this was an issue that was brought up by people in the local community. And we tried to involve as many local organisations as possible. So it really was, the idea was to have it as a community-led organisation, community-led event, sorry, rather than external people coming in and giving a particular message. So yeah, we worked with loads of local organisations, Friends of Shrocks Park, Leamount Baptist Church, St George's Centre, and we provided food. We had incredible edible smoothie bikes, a litter pick took place, and there were lots of conversations that were kind of woven into all of these activities. So over 150 people attended, and people were really engaged with the issues. We were kind of a little bit apprehensive. We weren't quite sure how it was going to go, but people did want to talk about it. And even just things like they were given sort of free bamboo toothbrushes. And again, you know, that doesn't necessarily tackle climate change, but it's a way in, it's a way of having a conversation, a starting point. So yeah, we have plans for 2 other events before the end of the project. We're just in the process of organising one in Mixenden. And again, that's with the community organiser at North Halifax Partnership. And again, will be about it being a kind of community-led event, engaging with local organisations and active citizens who are already active in their communities and doing stuff. So this one is going to be focused on a disused green space that people are interested in trying to kind of get up and running and to grow things on. And the idea is to try and connect as many of the local people who are already active on these issues to sort of build a sense of momentum in the area. I think these events are important for raising awareness, but also for connecting people. And it's about supporting the ongoing process of developing community-led solutions to a range of issues and understanding the connections between all of the different issues. So, for example, between health and climate change. So connecting the social justice and the climate justice issues. So I hope this has just given you an insight into some of our work. We feel like this is really just the beginning of a process. We're only working in a couple of geographical areas. Sorry, I was just going to say as well, we've got another event planned in Park Ward in the summer in partnership with Halifax Opportunities Trust. But obviously we think this approach could be replicated in other areas of Calderdale and perhaps with communities of interest as well as geographical areas. And we would really like to continue to support community-led action on climate justice in marginalised communities through active citizenship training. But we know that this needs, if for it to be meaningful, there needs to be sustained relationship building and support. But leadership from within these communities is also important for promoting marginalised voices and influencing climate policy and action so that it represents the needs of all communities. So yeah, very open to questions and comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hilary. I mean, just, oh God, I'm getting feedback. That's irritating. Thank you very much. Really good stuff and really interesting. I think everyone's sort of captivated from the work that you've done, and we'd be remiss not to try and grab some of your work and outreach that you've already done and try and embed that in developing the climate action plan. I think really important for the communities level stuff. And I think hopefully still helps sort of demonstrate that although we know the numbers are important, I think that, you know, embedding some of that change within people is equally important. I mean, myself and my daughter Cleo going vegan isn't going to change the world, but, you know, it does help to sort of have those conversations with people and just I think that's really important, especially in terms of speaking to different communities as you're trying to do, and really pleased you're majoring on the sort of social and climate business aspect of things. I won't hog the floor anymore though, and I'll look elsewhere for comments. But thanks once again, James.
Thanks, Ian. I think I attended one of the events that was done for kind of Park and Morley, and that was really useful. Because I understand you're doing work here for the Climate Change College. So I've just got a bit of an echo coming back from someone.
Yeah, that's right. So we're doing this work in partnership with the Climate Challenge College. So it's really a kind of community engagement part of the work to try and sort of make, to really sort of embed the college within the wider communities.
Yeah. So I guess like my feedback on the college thing is around so it's really hard to talk because someone's not muted. I'm getting an echo feedback. If everyone just, that's better, thanks. Yeah, just the feedback on that is the kind of move for people to get a qualification out of the course. At the moment, I know I don't think it's like formally recognised as a qualification, whereas there are kind of MVQs in things like understanding climate change and agriculture. And I just think for a lot of the people I represent, if they're thinking about their own employability, then having an actual qualification, because to give up 6 months of your life to do a course at the college where you don't come out of it with a qualification, I think is quite hard for a lot of people really kind of living in poverty. And it's harder to kind of get funding for it. So that I guess would be my feedback for the Climate Change College. I guess the other challenge for some of the work you're doing, you might just have to be aware, you know, if there's any conflicts of interest with one of your directors of the organisation also being a Labour councillor, might make it hard to do some work within the borough. But I guess, you know, that's okay when you're working for the Climate College, but it's just another challenge you're going to have, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks. I think your comments on the sort of lack of a qualification at the moment within the college is definitely something that's being explored. I think the course is accredited, but it's because it's only been running for less than a year. I think we're very aware that, you know, future work really needs to consider that, but that there also needs to be, in order to sort of engage and make it more accessible to lots of different people, that there probably needs to be a variety of different kinds of courses that are offered.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. I mean, it was really good to be there at the certificate giving the other week when the students graduated, and I think, you know, the chap from National Lottery Climate Fund who was there I think it exceeded his expectations about what they'd achieved, and the strength of their work was really good. So I would hope going forward that sets them with a really positive sort of base level going forward to create a bit more of a sustainable and as you say, sort of merited award, but more power to them for what they've achieved so far. Finn.
Thanks, Scott. Just Hilary mentioned the park ward and something to be done in the summer. I don't know if it's the same as the Green New Deal is working on. On the 7th of May, there's a plan to have the Asian community do something in Park Ward. That's the first thing. Could I also just mention that on the 26th of March, in the Hepburn Bridge Trades Club, there's a climate fair with Extinction Rebellion, Green New Deal, and others as well. And on the 5th of April, in the evening, 7:30, Tottenham College has two speakers, the manager, Julia Thorpe, and Rebecca Jones, are both speaking. Rebecca is very much into building work, as you may know. So that's just a plot, if you're interested in any of those. There's so many events going on around climate change around Calderdale. So hopefully one day we can all get them mentioned in one place so we all know what's going on. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Can I just take chairs again and just ask you a quick question that I meant to ask you around, you know, you mentioned stealth climate conversations, and clearly they're going to be in even more relief at the moment in terms of what's happening with energy and the rising cost of living. So are you seeing the way that you're talking to communities having to adapt, or are you even seeing a little bit more buy-in perhaps from communities that might not have fully understood it in terms of what's happening to them and the cost of food and living and energy and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see these as challenging as they are for us all to live with. I think I see them as an opportunity, really, because as these things kind of emerge, they're ways of continuing the conversation and making them seem very real and relevant to people and their daily lives.
Yeah, thank you. I can't see anywhere else, but I really hope that you'll continue to engage with this group and we can get as much insight from you and really sort of develop and build on the work that you're already doing. I think it's going to be key to talking to some of the communities that currently perhaps aren't engaging as much as we'd like to for very valid reasons. And thank you, on behalf of the Climate Working Party, for coming along and speaking to us about the really excellent work that you do. I'll be following, as you know, with keen interest. Big fan. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and it's really important work. What was I going to say? I think that there isn't any other business item. Does anyone have anything to add at this point? Anthony, you're first off the draw.
Thanks. I mentioned the importance of transport decarbonisation simply because the sheer quantity of the emissions tonnage at at a West Yorkshire level. And Friends of the Earth had identified two problems which were actually particularly bad because they were driving emissions upwards, not driving them down insufficiently, actually driving them upwards. One of them was Leeds Bradford Airport potential expansion, and you may have noticed last week that the airport has withdrawn their application, which you might think is a success, and a success particularly for the campaigning that has been done. But that isn't actually the case. The planning application was going to be heard at a public inquiry in September, and they would have lost it, and the airport could have expanded. They've decided to withdraw it because they've realised that they wouldn't make any money from it. At the West Yorkshire level, what is really disappointing is that both the Mayor and Leeds City Council continue to support the airport application. And it sort of just indicates, you know, we talked about the relationship between Calderdale and, you know, what happens in Leeds and West Yorkshire. It is really difficult to make progress on a really important area if, in fact, you've got really strong groups of policymakers who are, in fact, trying to push a particular sector of carbon emissions upwards. The other problem on transport is the roads capacity increase program that the combined authority are carrying on with, and for the last 2 years they've been working on a process to review the carbon impacts of this program, and we've been waiting for it, and finally we saw the papers this morning, which are going to Climate Committee on West Yorkshire Climate Committee next week. And it's so disappointing to see that this process isn't going to work. It isn't going to reveal the quantity of carbon emissions, and it's not going to be acting in good time in order to allow decision makers to realise, well, if it's been demonstrated that these road schemes are going to make the transport emissions worse, then we need to do something about that. And so, at Leeds and West Yorkshire combined authority levels, there are two areas where there are forces still pushing to drive emissions upwards, let alone bring them downwards. And I just wanted to throw that disconcerting and disappointing note into the conversation, so people shouldn't think that it's anything other than extremely problematic. Thank you.
No, I entirely agree, and I think it's something we may want to decide we have a view on. I know, I know the Labour Party on Calderdale Council took a view about the expansion, and that might be something that we want to revisit in light of recent events. So we'll definitely take that one away. I can't see any more hands, and I'm aware it's 8:05. So I'll just say to everybody, thank you very much for joining us and for all your input. It's been really, really good, really interesting. Thank you so much, Hilary, for joining us and with your presentation, and we really appreciate you coming along. So I think we all know what the next steps are at this point. I'll be seeing a lot of you quite soon for some of the more consultation work on the action plan. And kind of interesting, I think, to see where it goes from here. We can take conversations offline, but thank you for all of your input there, and we will catch up with you soon. Take care, everybody. Look after yourself.